Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Diversity Makes Us Better virtual panel. In honor of Global Diversity Awareness Month, today we have an amazing group of DEI champions to discuss the best practice to help business leaders, companies, and organizations build more diverse as well as inclusive relationship with employees, partners, and clients. My name is Amanda Ma. I'm the founder and CEO of Innovate Marketing Group, an award-winning event management agency based here in Los Angeles with a focus on DI and helping to fuel brands to change lives for the better. Before we begin, we'll be having a Q&A portion. We'll be accepting questions, so feel free to submit them in the comment section. Finally, we'll be announcing the winner of our book giveaway at the end of the program, so make sure you stay all the way through, and we'll be announcing the winners. And now let's introduce our amazing panel today. I said this is the powerhouse of DEI, so I grouped them all together here for you guys to make it so accessible. First of all, we have Carolina Veira. She's a DEI champion, author, speaker, consultant, as well as director at CareMax. Kevin Iwamoto, DEI advocate, author, speaker, and chief customer officer at Bisley Inc. And then last but not least, we have Farzana Nayani, DI coach, specialist, and international speaker. And all of them have a book. I think I mentioned author. So I think that's the commonality here. When you're just powerhouse, you have to have a book, which they all pre-vetted. But thank you all for joining us. So let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you for having us.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you for
thank
inviting
you.
us. Mhm.
I'm so excited. I mean, I think all of us here are so passionate about DEI, right? So when we're thinking about putting an event like this together to celebrate the Global Diversity Month, we thought, hey, this is a perfect time for that. So, to address to a panel, my first question is, why is diversity inclusion in the workplace important? And why don't we go ahead and start with Carolina?
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to learn from each one of you, and the work that everyone's doing is amazing. Now, diversity, equity, and inclusion to me speaks loudly around innovation and authenticity. So when I believe firmly that when you bring different talents, different experiences, different stories into this group of people, into this environment, all these ideas start flowing, all these experiences start flowing, and all of that brings attention and creates or makes room for new ideas, new services, new products. It speaks to a bigger audience. It speaks to customers, diverse clients, because as we know, our world is mega diverse. So why not create products and services that are also diverse? And you need to bring the talent for that. But also authenticity, because when you make room for everyone to have a voice and to share and to really be true to themselves and be honest about who they are and their experiences as well and their stories, it makes a better place to be at. And it could be work, it could be your house, it could be, restaurant, it could be anywhere, it could be an event. But it just makes room for everyone to just feel comfortable, right, around each other, and know that we're sharing the same experiences. And at the end of the day, we all share that commonality, that it's humanity, right? Yeah. So that, to me, those are two important things.
Yeah, I'll go next. So to me, it's really about a conscious effort to hear the diversity in perspectives and opinions and feedback that you can get from a diverse workforce, right? Because if you have a real homogeneous workforce, the kind of feedback and the kind of information you're going to get from that group is going to be very limited to a specific ethnicity or whatever. But when, the reality is, in today's world, we live in a multi-diverse cultural environment. And so many voices all count. And so if you're not listening to the many voices, you're kind of not only doing yourself a disservice, by leaving out a large portion of potential clients or partners, and ignoring a large sector of a target audience that you could really revolutionize your own business, in terms of profitability and exposure and things like that. So you're really doing a disservice when you're only listening to a homogeneous group and not allowing other voices to come in and provide input and feedback.
Great comments from everyone, and it's so great to be here with everyone with this conversation. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are important to me because I feel that we're seeing the need for belonging in the workplace and in the events and spaces that we're in.
Yeah.
And for many people, maybe they're sharing only a part of their identity at a time, or maybe they're hiding parts of themselves and how they communicate to fit in. And I think we're at a place now in our society where we really need to open up wider and expand
Yeah.
and create that belonging for everyone. And at the same time, we're being asked to show up in our authentic selves, but is it a safe place for us to do that?
Yeah.
So my approach really is around making sure we do have inclusive environments and events and arenas where people feel that sense of connection. And as the others have said, that's where you get the brilliance and the innovation and the connection with the audience and everyone who's a part of the team.
Right.
So that is what I see in terms of belonging.
And let's not forget that that also brings financial gains to the
Yes,
organizations,
exactly.
right?
That's
Because
right.
I know that's one of the items that they're always looking for, and how
Yeah.
to remain sustainable. So that's why it's key.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
but I
makes so
really like
much
what
business
Farzana
sense.
said in terms of like offering a secure and safe environment. Because what Carolina said is so true. The authentic is the best, right? But if you can be authentic in a safe environment, it just encourages more authenticity. But if you don't have a safe environment for them to be authentic, then you're denying the brilliance of people that really can shine and really be a real beneficial employee for you, because you're not giving them a safe space for them to be their authentic selves.
Right. And it's just less productive overall.
Yeah,
So
totally,
we're
right.
leaving ideas on the table,
Yeah.
people's energy and
Yeah.
expertise. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So good, so good. Yeah, definitely. Because a lot of people talk about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, but the belonging sometimes they forget,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
and then offering that safe space is so true
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
need to feel okay to kind of share their idea. They know at least they'll be entertained, or
Right.
it's okay to kind of be your authentic self,
Right.
right? And
That's
DEI is much larger, I think, part of work culture than it just even a year ago. I definitely think society is like really progressing in the right direction.
Yeah.
So for those of that's having discussion on DI for the very first time, which I think all the experts here we've been talking about it a lot, but for those that are just starting, what's your suggestion for them as they're just starting? So this time we'll go backwards. Farzana, you'll go first.
Yeah, my orientation's always around what do people want and what do they need. So I would say the way to start with DEI in any arena, any part of the work and the effort is to listen and to really hone in on what people are saying. I
Mhm.
think a lot of the times we focus on our organizational objectives and we have a plan, but guess what? That plan's not going to work if the people aren't on board, and also it doesn't match. So, for example, we're seeing right now with the strains of inflation and the needs for an increase in folks' wages, where there's this phenomenon called quiet quitting, where people
Yes.
are kind of like conserving their energy, but then
Yeah.
people who are leaders are wondering how to get people engaged. So there's that interplay, but really it's also people are strained. So things like offering mental health support or childcare, those are ways that you can offer the benefits or the support and address those needs without having to, increase compensation if that's not a possibility for a company, for example. And the same thing can happen with events and just making sure, you're making things accessible. Do you have an interpreter at an event who can do sign language, etc.? So do we think about that when we're planning our events and the gatherings that we have? So I really encourage that, I think, is to really hear from and learn about people. And that can be in the form of a survey or just, gauging people as they come through your doors.
For me, I agree with 100% what Farzana just shared. That was so spot on, Farzana. But to me, it really starts with self-introspection, right? It's researching and making a conscious effort to, pick up some best practices, and then a conscious application to your business and corporate culture. And when you do that research and you see what others have done to kind of foster that corporate culture internally, it's very easy to kind of pick and choose what you want to deploy within your own organization so that you create that type of inclusive corporate culture. But a lot of it has to be what I call brutal self-introspection, right? It's like, where are we today? So establishing a baseline for that, like, this is how we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. How do we want to improve this? Or do we want to improve it? Because you may have a culture where people don't necessarily care, or you have a culture that doesn't care. But if you want to create a culture that does care, you're going to have to go through some major change management to move and shift your workforce into a more culturally conscious workforce, is what I call it, right? So it's really a brutal self-introspection. It starts there, establishing that baseline, and then determining your North Star and where you want to go and how you're going to take it to that North Star.
And of course, you both took my answers, but but I agree with the both of you. I mean, it's meeting people where they are. It's becoming listeners, understanding.
I agree with that.
Yeah, it's about listening.
Total.
And I know, Farzana, you mentioned that, where we have to listen and we have to understand what they need. And for me, probably childcare wouldn't be something that I need, right? But for others, it would be. So try to listen and see what we're able to accomplish, if it's an organization, if it's a group, if we're part of an ERG. I mean, wherever it is, whatever little or big power we have, know that we can help and support groups of people by listening and understanding and being very I forget the word, but really, really paying attention to what's needed. And that's and then strategizing and then bringing resources, because maybe we don't have all the resources in the world, and I understand that.
That's
but
right.
We can. There's always something we can do, even if we think it's small. That adds up, and that creates change. And that's what people need. At the end of the day, we all want to be connected. We all want to be heard. We all want to be seen. We want to be valued, and we can do that with little things, little changes. And obviously it takes a lot to do that, because we need to understand where our biases are and where we are failing, and what not failing, it's such a harsh word for some people, but where there's room for improvement. So definitely work on ourselves first.
Yeah, I love that. Such good tips. And for one that we also experience is also, it just takes that first step. And don't get discouraged, because there will be pushback. Expect that. And there will be times you try, but hopefully each time you're failing forward, right? You learn your lesson and you're asking. I think all the panelists give such great tip in terms of listening. That was like the consensus I was getting, right? Listening to what people want, and then you're kind of getting the buy-in, and just keep trying, because there will be time, sometimes it didn't work. One of the board that I sat on, that was the case, because people were like, why do we need DEI? What is this position? Like, is this just so we are DEI friendly? But then what is really this role?
And Amanda, you said something important there. And it happens a lot with humans, right? We want everything perfect, and in reality, we don't need perfection. We just need to take action, right? And get the ball rolling and get started. So exactly what you said. Yes.
And I also find that employees and staff will respect you if you're authentic in what you're trying to do, right? Like what Carolina said, right? If you're authentic in what you're trying to do, but they also see you trying to make an effort towards improvement, right? Like they will cut you a lot of slack if they know that you're trying your best to kind of get to a place where it's going to be better for all, right? A different corporate culture, whatever the initiative is. But if you're not doing anything and you're not communicating, or this is not important to you, then you should be authentic to say so, right? Because then you're giving them the option to either stay with you or go and find a culture that they're more comfortable in, where they can be more authentic and they can feel more safe. And I think you owe it to your employees to let them know, or give them a heads up, what the corporate culture is going to be and how it's going to change. And you may or may not like it or be willing to support it, and give them the option to opt out if they want to.
And Kevin, you said something powerful there. Sometimes we do stuff and we don't communicate it.
Yes.
It's so important to
So
share and
important.
let people know. And what you said, even if
Absolutely.
we don't have all the answers just yet, just say, hey, I hear you and I'm working on it, or we're working on it, and we'll get there together.
Yeah. And if you have any feedback or information you'd like to share with us, please give it to us so they feel like they're part of the process and not, well, we're going to be subject to whatever the upper management is saying, not participating in any of the decision making that or outcomes of it. So important.
Well, Amanda, I was going to say that I'm glad sometimes that these groups that are skeptical share it, because I'd rather have them ask the tough questions than to go through it in a performative way. And then it's just a checkbox exercise.
Yeah.
So like what Carolina and Kevin are saying, it's good to have that feedback. It's good to get the input. It's good to be asked the tough questions.
Yeah.
And it's good to kind of come and converge together around something that is feasible and that does match where everyone is at.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't want them to be discouraged, because I do hear from the clients, especially like HR department, they're like, "Ugh, people just, and they're like, I don't know where to start. Where do I start? I'm like, there are professional DI consultants out there. Like, we don't have to know everything, know?
Exactly.
It's like, we go to the dentist for a reason. We don't try to do that ourselves. You hire a professional. And there are people who've been doing this a long time. Right? So it's great. And this is a great segue, because we also we talk to a lot of top leaders as well. So one of their question is always, how do they become inclusive leaders? We'll start with Kevin and then Carolina and Farziana.
Okay, sure. So really, I can only speak for myself as a leader. It's a constant stream of consciousness, like really making an effort to embed it into your thought process and actions, and providing consistency in branding and messaging, and really making it a part of who you are. And it takes work. I'm not going to lie. It takes work, because you could be as DEIB friendly as you think you are, but you're always learning, ooh, I could have been a lot more sensitive. Oh, I didn't think about that, right? So it's a constant learning and effort to always keep it front of mind and not back of mind. So for me, it's always like, I'll write little post-its like, where did you fail in DEIB today? What did you learn from it, right? But I like that performative way of evaluating, my own performance towards DEI. And when I tell people, listen, I'm just as flawed as everybody else, and I sometimes fumble the ball, when it comes to DEI, they look at me like, what? And I'm trying to say, look, no one is perfect in this. We all have like preconceived biases and things that we grew up with. Those are very heavy baggage to get rid of, right? You're not going to do it overnight. It takes a constant stream of consciousness and a constant reminder of who we are, what we aspire to be, and what kind of messaging are we giving in terms of inclusivity, equity, belonging, and diversity in our workplace, but also at home. It's not something you turn on and off. You have to teach your children to be more accepting and accept diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So it's not something you turn off and on. It's something that you consciously make an effort to let it be a fabric of your life, a part of who you are.
And I think we also talk about learning, and you mentioned it, Kevin, I mentioned it earlier. It's learning about our own biases. Where's the room for improvement and growth for us?
Yeah.
But it takes active listening. It takes also having those tough conversations. And that's the place that nobody likes. Nobody enjoys, sitting down with, well, what did I do wrong today? But that's where you grow. That's where we learn. And we need to sit down and have that that room for growth and understanding and empathy. But I also take it very personal in surrounding myself with diverse people, and not only, and when I mean diverse, I mean age, I mean backgrounds, I mean thoughts, I mean experiences, I mean everything in between, like we all know, and like we all do. So and just learning what their path and what their story has been, and why. I take to heart the social justice component of everyone's in every community, So I make an effort to understand what they've been through and understand it through their lens, right?
Yes,
Through,
right. That's
because
right.
that's the best that I can do. And then how do I support those groups?
Yeah.
What can I do to make their lives better and elevate them and elevate us and elevate together?
Yeah.
So I think, like you mentioned, Kevin, it takes work, it
Mhm.
takes commitment, it takes passion, it takes
Yeah.
love, it takes knowing that there's books out there like
Mhm.
Persona that we can use and learn and read about, and
Mhm.
there's plenty of information out there, but it
Yeah.
takes, okay, I'm gonna sit down and spend time
Yeah.
understanding and learning and having those difficult conversations. That works for me.
It's a real self-commitment. You know, it's a commitment to self first, but it's also a commitment to your organization. If you're an executive, you have to be equally as committed to making sure that your organization understands and creates that whole awareness, self-awareness, and self-improvement. And it's okay. Like, I love what you said, Carolina. It's like, we're not perfect. We're not trying to be. You know, we're all creatures, we're all human beings that learn as we grow. And so the only way to do that is to have self-introspection and be self-aware and learn from all of these areas. Like, you know, something really simple, like if you're planning a big event, you know, make sure that there's no Muslim holidays or Jewish holidays that conflict with the event. That's showing sensitivity and inclusion for the people of the Muslim community or the Jewish community, you know. And if you have people that are, you know, physically challenged, then you want to make sure that you've also included arrangements for them to navigate a conference so that they don't feel disadvantaged or inconvenienced. So it's really about thinking beyond your own comfort levels and your own knowledge and skill sets and expanding that to a greater awareness.
This is so key. And, you know, when we think about how to be an inclusive leader, the common theme here is to go past your own comfort and to go into discomfort, right? And that can include surrounding yourself with people who will push your ideas.
Yeah.
And as Kevin was saying, move into like that self-introspection. And it's hard. And the other book I wrote, it's actually on raising multiracial children, and it's about parenting. And the same things apply, because in that I ask, are you ready to talk about it? Because guess what? The kids are ready. It's us that is not. We are not ready, right? And the same thing as leaders, our staff are ready to go, but are we as leaders prepared because we're scared of making a mistake?
Yeah.
So I think the first thing is to get familiar and comfortable with the discomfort.
Yeah.
I would say the second thing is it's what others are saying in terms of tying it to a goal. And I think DEI just, you know, sometimes comes across as doing it for its own sake. And then we miss the purpose of it. But there's a lot of reasons why, and we talked about it.
Yeah.
But I think each organization has to connect it to their own purpose. Is it retention of people? Is it reaching out to a different market, right? Is it the visibility and connection to the community? Is it, right, the passion that and the mission that you have?
Right.
So sometimes that's not there. So people really need to not only look inward, but look at the org and connect it to the goals. And I think that's just a really practical way of how to begin as a leader.
Yeah. And I also think it's also setting expectations, right? Like whenever I address groups or teams and stuff, I always say, look, I'm human. So I am going to make a mistake. I'll tell you that right now. That's a guarantee.
Being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you have to know that my heart is in the right place. My intentions are in the right place. And if I should stumble or if I make a miscalculated judgment call, please feel free to call me out on it. I'm very open to changing or getting an alternate perspective, right? When you set up that level of understanding and openness, people are more committed, and because they want to work with you, and they're a heck of a lot more forgiving if you do make a fumble, you know, because you already said from the beginning, I'm not perfect and I'm going to make a stumble. Just call me out on it, you know, and let's talk about it. And so I just find it's a healthier environment where people can be authentic and they can feel free and safe to express whatever that they want to without knowing they're not going to get fired or they're not going to get a bad performance review because you pissed off the chief customer officer.
Right.
You know? So it's really about setting the expectation and creating that safe environment for them.
Right. And trust with
And
each
trust.
other. Exactly.
And you know, it's also, and I believe it's also a little bit about not being afraid of failing, right? Because sometimes we think, and I think Farsana mentioned something briefly about that. It's being comfortable with failure too, because that's how we learn, and that's how we evolve. But fear and failure and fear of failure is what stops us sometimes.
Yes.
So just overcoming that.
Yeah. I actually had that for the first part of my career when I was learning and growing. I was like, my father had driven in this Asian thing. Amanda, you know what I'm talking about, where, you know, you can't fail, you have to succeed, you have to work harder, you have to study harder, you have to be
Trust me,
better than everybody
that's for a lot of us.
a lot of cultures. Yeah.
Oh my
So,
God,
you know,
yeah.
but it's really, it's, you know, it's at some point, everybody gets an epiphany like, okay, you know what? I don't have to be perfect all the time. I can make mistakes. I can forgive myself. As long as I learn from it and grow, then I really haven't failed, right? Failure is failing and not recognizing why you failed and not learning from that, you know. So, but if you can accept the failure and learn from it, then I consider that a win. I don't consider that a failure, you know, because every time you learn something and you improve on who you are and what you represent, then it's actually a success. It's not a failure.
Yeah. And it makes a bigger impact too. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
You know, but I think that is something, I mean, for the Asian culture, I definitely think that's something that I had to personally learn, because you know,
Me too.
you're supposed to get A.
Yeah.
That's not even a conversation. All my friends get A's.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? You know, so it's like, but that's,
Yeah.
you know, if you grow up in that kind of with that expectation, it'll be different.
It's hard to
Right.
get rid of that. It's hard to go beyond that. But at some point, each of us has that epiphany, whether it's early in your career, midpoint in career, even later in your career. The fact of the matter is, as long as you get to that epiphany at some point, then you're a better person for it, I think.
And you know what? And sharing that knowledge,
And sharing
your experience with others from your generation, from younger generations, older generations, because it's interesting. But the more I talk to people, the more the more conversations, conferences, they all have the same fear, right? The fear of failing,
failure,
and we all think that we're the only ones going through that, and in reality, that's not the case. And that's why I love diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we make room for having those conversations and understanding that we all go through the same, and we can all succeed, right? And we can all get over that hump.
Yeah. So true.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think one thing that, Kevin, I want to also mention when you guys were talking about events, it's like there's so many easy ways. I just want to remind the audience too, there's so many easy ways to incorporate. There's literally, now instead of hiring an on-site translator, there's actually an app. You could just like scan the QR code and there's live translation in like Chinese to like so many different languages. And then, you know, it's just so accessible now, but it's really, do you seek out to provide those opportunities? Right. So really, as you're planning or doing different events, you could really consider that, and it's so accessible.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then how, you know, in terms of company, how do you guys, because all of you are involved in different, you know, events and whatnot, but how do you guys make sure, or how do companies make sure their events are more diverse and inclusive as well? Farzana, we'll start with you.
Yeah, there's this big company, which I won't name, and I remember going to a panel, and there's 5 people and a moderator, and all 6 were white, and the 5 panelists were men, and it was on business, and I was like, we're in LA, that's where I live. How could we have a panel like this? This is completely inconsiderate of the local community and just our world around us. And I have nothing against a particular group, but it's just not representative. So I think we've got to go beyond. I think people just kind of like pull in people they know of their immediate network. We just have to go a couple degrees beyond that. Right. And say, hey, you know what? I want to be intentional. Let's think about it. Even in our panel here today, this is great. It's diverse, right? We have a range of perspectives. So that's the first thing. I think secondly, we also have to think about, you know, in the long term, what our plan is. So if you can't get it all in one time, maybe at the future time, right? Focus on, you know, women or something, or, you know, underrepresented people of color or whatever it is. And I've seen really great experiences through employee research groups, which I do a lot of work with, which are affinity-based groups in companies. And sometimes they'll bring in, allies, people from different groups, or they'll partner, they'll collaborate. There's a really great one where May is Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and then
Yes.
June is Pride Month.
Yeah.
And they have handoff events where they try to do a bridge event. So it's not just it doesn't just end. It's sort of like, here's where we come together and then pass on the torch. And I love that. It just gives me chills to think about how intentional and smart that is.
Yeah.
So it's not just my group or your group, right?
Yeah.
So I think we can be creative and have fun with it and enjoy each other and really just be in each other's presence and diversify.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's sometimes we're so focused on bringing to panel discussions or to events people that are super known and around nationwide, and not realizing that we have so much talent within our own groups and communities and within our own networks. And I know that you mentioned sometimes we bring people from our own networks, but as long as we're intentional about who we're bringing, like Amanda, this is the perfect example, like Farzana mentioned. I mean, us all, but you somehow you thought, okay, these are the three people that I want to see in my panel discussion. And I think I do the same. We all do the same as to, okay, who are we bringing to the table, and who's going to be representative of all these different communities that we know exist. So it does take us doing the work, because sometimes the people within our corporations don't know how to do it. Realizing that we have the support of consultants that can help us do a better job, that are experts at what they do. But also I'm big on community leaders. I'm big on not only nationwide, but we have real talent within our communities. Bring those experiences, bring that talent to people, and then connect with other organizations, with underrepresented groups, but also with NGOs, with NPOs that are doing so great job out there. So connect with them and partner with them, and connect with community colleges, because we know that community colleges are very accessible to underrepresented communities. And so bring those people to the table, into the conversations too.
Yeah. So the only thing I would add, because both Farzana and Carolina said a lot of very, very helpful things, it's that intentional component. So I look at things, especially at my age, I need to write things down, or I need to have a list. I can't just think on the top of my head anymore. So what I tell people for some best practices is, you need to look at your organization planning lists, and you need to start to incorporate intentional DEI supportive practices and processes that are going to always remind you, oh, did I check on, the handicap situation? Did I check on religious holidays that might circumvent people from coming? Did I check on my staffing? Is my staffing diverse? And also, if you're talking about DEIB, right? For gosh sakes, you really need to do a self-audit of your audience. Like, who's your attendee audience, right? Like, if you're going to promote women, you shouldn't have a panel of 3 white men. It's that there's nothing in common. Or if you're going to talk about API, Asian Pacific Islander, then have a panel of API people, and not experts or professional speakers who don't represent the race, because they don't know what the challenges are in being an API, part of the API community. So it's really intentional. Like, take a look at your audience, plan accordingly, revise and update all of your planning and process checklists, right? And make sure that, you're walking your talk. Like, one of the things that really made me feel really positive about, I think we've made some progress when it comes to DEI and consistency. And one of the things that drove me crazy about DEI in the early stages is the not walking your talk. Like, oh, we're very DEI supportive and blah, 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 blah. But you still have, majority of your sessions with middle-aged white men. That's not, you're saying that you're this, but your performative side is not displaying what you just said. That just drives me crazy. So this year, I'll give a shout out to MPI WEC. I happened to be on the last featured panel. And the last featured panel had an Asian person, myself, had a Black person, African-American person with Zomore. And it had the current president and the former president and a young millennial male from Europe. That's a diverse panel. That's the way you want to end a conference, because when you look at the audience, that's who's in the audience. And so if you're going to say that we embrace DEI and, we have different sessions about DEI, be intentional, be consistent, and demonstrate and walk the talk. Have panels and have sessions that reflect your sensitivity and your inclusion of DEI.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, there's few events. There's one big event I just went to recently. Same thing, like they had diversity in terms of the panel, which was not the case a year ago.
Yeah.
So it was a huge drastic change, but then they sent out, okay, we're going to do more DEI, but they also really stepped up and walked the walk.
Yeah.
Right. And there was alignment in terms of their communication and then also what was executed.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it really, it's a message that you have to be consistent about. It can't just be, well, we have to be like, everybody's talking about DEI, so we have to check the box on having 2 DEI sessions. And that is really not the point. The point is to make it where it's intentional, but then it becomes, it's not a forced thought in your head. It's just natural then, right? That's where we need to get to this point where including all, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a conscious thought. It's just second nature. We just do it, right?
Yeah, I think the point being made also is around progress.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was something year over year where you see a difference, like we need to celebrate that. Sure,
Absolutely.
it might be small, but
Yeah.
it's progress. And I think we can get into the rut where, I work with organizations, and quite frankly, some of the lists that people want to put together of goals should be a 5-year plan, not a 1-year plan.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of level setting that needs to happen around what's possible. How does organizational change happen? What can we, have in terms of buy-in?
Yeah.
But it's important to celebrate as we go. And I think sometimes the work is just ongoing and we forget to do that.
And, I'm really happy you said that, Farzana, because the other day I became aware that for the first time on a US minted coin, you have an Asian American person in Anna May Wong, who was a legendary Chinese actress in Hollywood's golden age, who is now going to be on the back of quarters. That's the first time an Asian person ever made it to a US minted coin. And that's a huge, huge win for DEI and inclusion. So,
Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. I think this is a great segue. I'm so glad this is going this way. What are some tools and resources, and I know this panel has a lot, for people that are just getting started in their DEI initiatives? Farzana, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I saw Carolina unmute. So did you want to go?
Oh, I was going to mention, for me, what's worked, it's partnerships, right? Partnering with other organizations, partnering with other groups, partnering with colleges, community colleges, universities, understanding that we can be impactful in that way, and listening to what our customers, clients, whatever term we use, are looking for, right? What our audience is looking for as well. What do they need? So there's a lot of active listening and partnerships and building alliances, what I call strategic alliances with other groups.
Yeah.
That's very, like we all talked about, it's been intentional about what we're doing. And that has been key to me. So Farzana, take it away.
I want to echo that. So even within an organization, I mentioned employee resource groups, and those are affinity-based groups around an identity. It could be the pride group or parenting group or veterans group or any of the racial or gender groups. And they're a real great resource for each other as a collective community building space, but then also it could be a focus group for a new product, right? You want to test something out. At the same time, I think, there are a lot of DEI committees and councils, and I want to caution people forming them because sometimes it's a lot of labor and effort. But there are like a lot of different events and alliances and collectives that are outside of an organization that you can join and learn from. So I'm seeing a lot of DEI efforts within an association. Let's say you're part of the Architectural Association or real estate, right? They're doing such great work and a lot of amazing events and networking. So I personally am really inspired by the association events in addition to like the in-house programming that's being done.
Yeah.
And that's a great point, the one you just made, because then we don't need to do it all, right? We can
Yeah.
rely on other people and work
Absolutely.
together, and
Yeah.
Right.
and it speaks well for the organization, it speaks well
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
ERG, and it
Yeah.
speaks well of everyone.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
for me, it's like I echo everything that Carolina and Farzana just said. There's a lot of information online you can get. There's really brilliant consultants and experts like our ladies here on the panel, and there's just so much available. And something Carolina said, which I have always found to be very, very true, which is partnering with like-minded individuals, hiring like-minded companies that can help you in your goals to be more inclusive. Like, for example, Amanda, your company is a DEI inclusive company, right? So if somebody's looking for expertise there, they should hire your company, because they don't need to train you in that. You're already trained in that and you can execute on that. So the outcome is predictable, right? So it's like, why recreate the wheel when you have so much assets and so much best practice information out online and in books, and you have consultants and experts, who are very happy to, willing to kind of share their best practices and experiences with you. So you're not alone. You should definitely reach out, reach out, and take advantage of all of the information and people that are out there who can help you.
100%. And one of the board I sat on, we do the national call, honestly, and then because the whole point is not try to reinvent the wheel,
Yeah,
right? Like we
right.
get on these national calls and regional call, and people are just sharing their best practices and
Yeah.
also what has worked, what hasn't worked. And that was so tremendous to kind of learn from that and say, hey, and then say, well, can I perhaps try that in my region and see if it
Right.
works? So you don't necessarily have to do that yourself, but tap
Right.
into the talents of the community, the partnership, right?
Yeah.
Everything that this panel has kind of mentioned, I think those are great advice.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many tools, DI consultant, there's 3 right here, I'll just do the event part. But it's just honestly, like even we were doing an event and then I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this title. So instead of just trying to guess it myself or, my team, I call Farzana. I
Yeah.
say, hey, what do you think?
Yeah,
like it's
rely on
very
love
DI
that.
friendly.
We're
Yeah,
always
Rely-
here.
she has a whole book on it,
Yeah.
Rely on your network. I mean,
Yeah,
you have
absolutely.
network of support.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ask the question. Don't be afraid. But it's I mean, shout out to Kevin for giving a shout out to Amanda. But it's true, Amanda. You're nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the type of work you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely do something like, hey, reaching out to you and putting an event together that it's very thoughtful and intentional. Definitely.
Yeah.
And thank you for supporting women-owned businesses, by the way, because that's
Absolutely.
it's that's when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's what we mean.
I
Giving
love
an
it.
opportunity to small business owners, to medium-sized business owners, to solo entrepreneurs, but also to women-owned businesses. There's so much diversity out there. Let's give them a hand, right?
Yeah. Well, we have to support one another, right? Like when one group is attacked or when one group is experiencing whatever negativity in the press and stuff, it affects all of us to some degree, right? And so we need to support one another to make sure that any kind of hate speech, any kind of, lie, or any kind of misconstrued information doesn't proliferate the news media and stuff. So we all have a voice. We just need to use it.
Absolutely. And when we unite and we're all speaking, our voices get louder.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
This has been so great. I mean, there's been so many, I'm like reading all the comments, this has been really great. And people really love the authenticity as well as the sincerity that's really shining through in your messages. So at this time, I want to transition to, we're going to announce the book winner and then we'll circle back to do some Q&A. Kevin, thank you so much for your time, because I know Kevin has to step away first, but he promised me that we could send him some questions to help answer, so we can always post those later.
Yep.
But we will have Carolina and Farzana to address some of the questions that you guys put in the Q&A.
Great. Thank you for inviting me today.
Of
Bye.
course. Yeah, it's not over. Don't leave. But Kevin, yes, you could go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. So right now we're going to announce the winners. So I know our team is going to be pulling that up. Congratulations to
Ooh.
all the winners. You guys either get a copy of Farzana's book, which is The Power of Employee Resource Group, or you're going to get a copy of Carolina's book, which is Shiny. Both are fantastic and just super excited. I mean, talk about just learning and growing. This is part of that process. So congratulations. If you see your name here, please make sure you email us at info@innovatemkg with your full name and mailing address. Okay, we cannot mail it to you if we don't have your address. I know it sounds silly, but yes, make sure you do that. And great. Now we'll transition back to the Q&A. But before I do that, I just want to remind everybody in the audience too, if you're not a winner of those books and you want to purchase them, our team will be putting the links in the chat so you can still take advantage and tap into the talent of these great panelists, and just read and learn from their wisdom, I would say. Right? There's just so much wisdom there and so accessible. Yeah, perfect. So now we're going to go jump into some questions. I kept seeing them come through and I was so anxious to answer them, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to hold out Q&A. First question, thank you, Hendrik. How do you tie in the organizational culture to the DI efforts? How do we find out the openness to this in our companies? Great question. Farzana, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes back to what we were both saying around tying it to goals and what the drivers are. I would say in terms of how to find openness, you've got to hook on to a couple of champions. So start with the people who will support it and will get behind it. And I also want to say, run it by people who you think might not be in support, because again, it's always helpful to hear what the resistance or challenges are so you can help inoculate against that. So I do like to kind of pressure test the idea as it's happening and then go slow. Don't go too fast. Do a little bit at a time, have shorter term goals, and then also the long-term ones.
And if I may add to that, I love when we find the allies within our organizations, but try to shoot for the stars, right? And so talk about these things with your leadership team, with your CEO, your CFO, especially because you're going to need financial support along the way at some point, right? Maybe not in the beginning when you're just brainstorming. So having their buy-in in all your initiatives and ideas, or at least some of them, your passion is gonna shine. They're gonna see the passion in you and just go for it, right? Have those conversations, try to get them involved, try for them to be your champions, because it's going to facilitate things along the way.
Yeah.
And if we can tie it to some type of ROI and some financial numbers, that's key too. Because I believe in creating and building initiatives that have both components, the non-financial part, and then how are we somehow adding value to the organization.
That's so good, because it's true. I think for the executives that are approving the budget, right, or trying to approve budget, it's like, okay, how is this going to make business sense? I think you have to really prove that. And this coming at such a good time, we actually just finished a Woman ERG event, and it's costing 4 times more than what they usually would
it's worth
cost,
it though,
right? But you know what,
like,
yeah, after the event, they're getting tons of emails saying, oh, my company really cares about me. This is so good. Like, this is the best event ever. But, they don't know that. So I think they can also look for like statistics or data to back you up in terms of like the number. Thank you so much. Let's go to the next question. With the economy going towards recession, would DI, yes, we're going to a recession. Would DI become a secondary now? I mean, it's barely just coming into light. So would it become secondary priority for many organizations and lose focus? Carolina, what do you think?
I actually think that we have to start thinking of DEI as a strength rather than, it's tied to the financial or the economic situation of a country. And so if everything goes south, then everyone within the DEI component area that goes down, because we are at the end of the day people and humans, and we need what DEI brings to the different organizations, and that's as far as team members, that's as far as clients. So I don't believe so. I think it's actually going to be in strength. It's actually going to make us stronger and recession proof in a way. So I would encourage people to not think that way, and to find meaningful initiatives that can be developed by implementing DEI as part of your strategy for your organization. Because there's always, like we said, there's always something to do. We have to start listening to the groups. We have to start thinking and innovating and bringing different people to those rooms and create different ideas and have different ideas and create different services and products. It's possible.
If I can answer that, I want to say that there's a both and happening. So you might find that there are budgets being cut. However, I don't think it's necessarily a lack of focus or attention or prioritization. I think perhaps people are finding ways to interweave it in an integrated way. So I want to caution people thinking that a cut means a negative necessarily. Obviously, I'm all for more full-time equivalent FTE people behind this and DEI directors and whatnot. But as I've been talking with people where this has happened, we're trying to strengthen and foster the fact this is a joint effort, right? And so if that is happening to folks, I just want to reiterate, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a secondary priority. We're having to tighten, the belt on a lot of things. So HR and other things are, being looked at. That being said, I think it needs to be a priority, as Carolina was saying. It has to be, and it has to be something we do see as fostering opportunity and a strength. I agree. So I think both are happening, but there are always waves of this. This is not new. So if you look at, folks who've been doing the work for a long time, we've had to pivot and adapt to the needs as well. So I think just with anything, we just have to be ready.
Yeah. And if anything, I honestly see this as, because we're going through a recession, that's what DEI is that much more important, right? This is how you keep your employees. This is how you keep your clients. This is how the society, the new culture, right? So I think should be the priority.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you don't want to lose talent just because. I mean, when there's an opportunity there to retain it through DEI.
Well, and I want to add just a statistic. There's research that shows that candidates are asking companies if they have DEI efforts, and if they don't, they won't actually choose that company. So to Carolina's point, and also to Amanda's point, people are getting smart and intentional around where they want to spend their time.
100%. And for us, like, a lot of people want to apply here because they're like, oh, we saw you guys are DEI friendly, you guys are woman-led, and I'm like so proud of that, right? Mm-hmm. And I also heard from friends who work from corporate America, they're like, we're not DEI, I'm thinking about looking for a new job.
Absolutely.
And I was like, but they pay you so well. And they're like, but she's like, but I don't feel like I belong. So your words are, yeah.
And you know what, the whole workforce is changing, and it's looking for a place where they can feel fulfilled, where they're happy. I mean, and it's in constant evolution and connecting with a bigger purpose. So, and DEI has that. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging has that element, right? It makes you part of a bigger group. It makes you feel valued. So that's why when I say it should be, it's not going to be secondary. It's going to be part of the strategy of the whole organization.
Definitely. All right, let's go to another question from the audience. Great dialogue. Please speak on how events can be more innovative and creative for all. Who wants to take this one?
That sounds like a question for you, Amanda.
No,
I'm just kidding.
I agree.
No, I almost start with panelists. Come on. You guys are my star. Yeah.
To me, it's like you mentioned, when you have questions, you ask your team, right, what to do. And I think our teams have a lot of knowledge as well. If we have a diverse group of people. They're going to have a lot of insights. So incorporating those insights, those ideas into the events that you're preparing, that's one. Bringing partners also, and giving you their feedback on things like after the event, just following up with them and understanding what they like, what they didn't like. Using consultants. I mean, I have to give some shout outs here, but it's true. I mean, there's a reason why they're there, to support, to provide help, to provide guidance. So that's a way to become more intentional about diversity.
I'm going to say, again, take a little bit of a risk, push the envelope in terms of the content and the topic, be a little bit creative and expand the possibility. Don't just do the same thing. Of course, you want to have support and logistics behind the event, but I've seen some really neat things that are impressive to me that are unique. And I think as we are doing hybrid and in-person events again, there's just a lot of opportunity around how to keep it safe, be intentional. So I'm keynoting a talk tomorrow, and this organization bought 100 of my books and put them in a box and, sent it with water bottles and their branding. And I got one of them as well, a package. I opened it up, there's snacks. I was just really impressed. And I know those personal touches also make a really big difference. And I know, Amanda, you do a number of different ways, have a number of different ways that you do this as well. So, over to you. Would love to hear also what you think.
And those events that incorporate activities as well, like, I was recently at an event for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and we had to create with roses, we had to put like a little I'm forgetting the word in English, so you ladies have to help me here, but it's like a bouquet. There we go. Bouquet of roses and flowers. So something like that, and that you can bring home or you can give to somebody who probably is going through a tough time in their lives, right? I mean, it was like breast cancer awareness, so maybe somebody who's struggling with cancer. So doing something that it's meaningful like that, those events, you never forget about that, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of times when we are planning an event, I think it's working. We always work on this, what we call attendee journey mapping, right? So it starts with the demographic, like who's coming to this event and what is the KPI. We make a big deal about the KPI because we really want to begin with the end in mind. Like, who are we servicing? How is this event going to be impactful? So that is not just another event, but rather an experience that's going to really change lives for the better, right? So, and then through that, we come up with ways. We definitely entwine in terms of like surprise and delight, because people love that, so coming up with different ideas depending on the type of event. We recently just did a Hispanic Heritage Month event, and really we have to be culturally sensitive to just events itself, and also incorporating ideas that could just bring not the brand to life, but in this case, bring the culture to life, right? So I think there's just so many ways. And then we're brainstorming among the team, right? So that's another reason why it's good to have diversity, because then they also have contribution in terms of the different ideas as well. Well, that really wraps up our conversation today. You guys are so amazing. Thank you to the panelists for spending your time with us and sharing your wisdom. Thank you to everybody that's tuning in today. And just, again, thank you for Carolina, Kevin, Afrazana. We had a wonderful time just sharing about DEI, and we hope this is not our last panel or our time together, because we really want to continue this effort, right? I kind of said it in the beginning of this session that we're all champions, and if any of us can help you, please feel free to reach out, and there's resources out there, and we hope you think about the insights that you took away from this panel, and I hope you just take some action from today's, because again, the panels mentioned too, if all of us just take a step, right? Don't just come and listen is great and don't do anything, whether it's speaking, reaching out to your company and asking about their DEI efforts or brands that you care about. I think that will just bring us to a better world overall. So thank you to our speakers, and thank you all for joining us.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you so much. Bye.
Bye now. Thank you.